right on because I'm going to give you a couple of tips and a couple of things that you'll want to remember about yourself. So please come help yourself to that. If it's okay with you guys today, I'm going to be real. Is that okay with you? I'm not going to stand up here and tell you I have it all together. I never get afraid. I never have problems. I am so well put together that there is no issue in my life. Not reality, right? So I have to tell you, I've been through a lot of difficult seasons, as I'm sure you guys have been. Right now is a difficult season, or at least for most of you it feels that way, doesn't it? And so today we're going to talk a little bit about living through the difficult seasons of your life, rediscovering your joy, changing your perception, and altering your mindset. One of the things I teach on is acting skills and body language. I usually teach people how to change their body language, not how to read other people, because you can get caught up in that. You can get caught up in what was that micro expression. So how we start is I teach you what to do with your body so that you can present the image that you'd like to present. And that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about today. We're also going to be talking about what is your focus. So I will leave time for questions, but do expect this to be a little bit interactive because I don't think it does any good if I stand up here and talk to you and I don't allow you to participate. So expect to participate. So everything we encounter, we have the opportunity to influence. Our choice is, are we going to influence it for the better? Or are we going to influence it for the worse? Sometimes when, have you ever had somebody who was just really negative? And I have to say, I'm saying this on camera, which I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to anyways. I told you I was going to be real. My mother is one of the most tenacious, gifted women I know. She can do things that I have never seen anybody else do. At the age of 77, I believe it was, she became the building contractor for a church building. She'd never been a building contractor before. And she built this church out in the middle of nowhere, which now is very well attended. She also she got her master's, she worked on her PhD, almost finished it and decided, you know, that's not what I want to do with my life. So she decided to go off in a different direction. She is a woman that I admire greatly, but she has an issue on occasion, as we all do, and I do too. She gets stuck in the negative. So many things happen, so many things occur, whether she sees it on social media, or my dad and mom were pastors until a year and a half ago. And so all of that stuff that happens to others weighs heavy on them sometimes because people call them for prayer requests. And so sometimes she lets those things infiltrate her being. Even though she's positive, even though she's a go-getter, even though she can do all these things, she lets these pieces become a burden to her. And sometimes we do that. We let social media, we let somebody else's problems, we let that neighbor who wants to vomit their problems onto you so they can walk away feeling better. Ever known anyone like that? I think I've been that person on occasion. So we have to work on how we change our mindset. We have to work on what we do with our perception. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And I want to give you some tips. I love to recommend books while I'm here, and I read 5 books at once. It's just the way my brain works. I think of it as college curriculum. That's what you did in college, so that's what I do now. But because I don't want to overwhelm you, I am going to recommend one book today, and it is Hope Rising. It was actually written here in Tulsa. There is a science of hope, and this gentleman is at OU here in Tulsa. So I highly recommend his book, and he also has a Facebook page. If you don't have time to read the book, there's a lot of different ways you can follow this, but definitely you should pick up this book, because how you feel about your world impacts what you're going to do. So let's talk about IQ versus EQ. Which is better? So IQ, a lot of people will tell you is stagnant by the time you become an adult, that it's stable, that it's something you can't change. I actually disagree, but it's not something that we have as much control over. However, EQ stands for emotional quotient, IQ, intellectual quotient, EQ, emotional quotient, and that is something we can influence. Do you know that there are studies done that say for each point you increase your emotional quotient, you can increase your bottom dollar, $1,300 a year? What is EQ? EQ is knowing how to read other people, knowing how to empathize, knowing how to connect emotionally, and it's also knowing how to control your own behavior and your own emotions. Doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will. We doubt ourselves and we let ourselves be discouraged and we let others discourage us. I can deal with failure and I can deal with doubt. So we're going to stop for a second. Like I told you, this is an interactive presentation. And I want you to work with me on a reframe. And all of you have had this experience. So let me tell you a little bit about myself so that I can help you know where I'm going with this. So I have a son with Down syndrome who is almost 29 years old, March 6th. 30 years ago, I found out at about 10 weeks pregnant that my son was probably going to be born with Down syndrome. And I had a choice. Did I want to terminate the pregnancy or did I want to continue with it? You can actually find my TED Talk called The Eradication of Down Syndrome and learn a little bit more about that if you're interested in that subject. But my son, I was told when they were telling me, would you like to terminate this pregnancy, about all the things he wouldn't do, all the things he wouldn't be, all the things that were impossible. I want you to know that my son has done everything they said he wouldn't and way beyond. He's actually a scholar, he's a great reader, he has a job, that's where he is right now. All of those things were true, if I would have believed them, but I made the choice. I chose not to believe them. I chose to believe that he was capable of more. I chose to believe that what others said, others discouraging me, did not have to define my parameter nor his. So many times what happens to us in life, it's not what is the real situation. It's what we decide to do with it. 12 years ago, I was a trainer for a national educational company that taught people how to read, how to comprehend, how to write. It was at one point also included math. And I was in a car accident and it didn't look like a big deal. I knew I was really sort of discombobulated, confused, a little bit not quite right at the end of the car accident. The ambulance came, went to the hospital, I had all the tests. They said, oh, we think you're fine, you're gonna be okay. Well, the next day I was out shopping and my face became paralyzed. And with that face paralysis, I lost my speech. And I went overnight, literally, from being a keynote speaker and being a person who also was speaking, training around the country, to having no speech. It was life-changing. I could tell you a whole lot more about that, but with that circumstance, I can choose two things. I did get back my speech, as you see, because here I am. It did take me over a year to be fluent again, and it took me several years to become more comfortable speaking in front of large groups again. But with that situation, I had a choice. I could say, this really sucks, my life is over, It will never be the same again. What am I going to do? And I could choose to sit in my pity party, or I could choose, as I chose, to say, this really stinks. I don't like this at all. This is hard. I don't know what to do. And then say, okay, so what am I learning from it? And I learned to help the people I work with who happen to be adults with intellectual or differing abilities to communicate more effectively. I learned to take my left brain side, which is where I was, and shift more to the right brain side. I learned to use that vulnerability to be a more effective speaker. So now I want you to take your piece of paper, and I want you to do two things. One, I want you to write 3 things first that you are really good at, that you know you're good at. Don't say, well, I wonder if I'm okay at this. No, this is your turn to brag on yourself. You're bragging to yourself. What are you really good at that you know you can do? What are you looking for a job in? What is your passion? What do you like to do? What's your hobby? And then the second thing I want you to do is I want you to take one situation. I don't care if it was in high school, if you were 5, and that you chose to flip the script. And I want you to write that down. So I'm going to give you about 3 minutes, 2 minutes. And so 3 things that you know you're good at. You shouldn't have to think about it. Just write them down. You know what you're good at. Come on, guys. You know what you're good at. People tell you all the time, hey, you're really good at that. And then write down one thing where you flip the script, whether it was you fell out of your tree, you broke your arm, but you learned to read better that summer. You know, what's one thing in your life? Oh, that guy turned you down for a date? You went out with this guy instead? He turned out to be your soulmate. Woman, you could say, either way. What's one thing that you thought was going to be a disaster? You didn't get into the school of your choice. You didn't get into that major. You did something else and it turned out to be what you were supposed to be doing. I want you to, everybody, at least write a word. You don't have to finish the thought right now, but write a word. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to say, please come back to this and finish it later. If you didn't finish it now, but this makes a difference. Sometimes when we're looking for a job, when we're looking for a change in life, we're so focused in the track that we've been in. Well, I've always been a teacher, which was for me. I've always been an engineer. I've always been a whatever. Instead of looking at our skills, what can I do? Maybe what would I like to do? And then thinking about those times when you flipped the script. The more often we practice being aware of flipping the script, I'm going to say not even flipping the script, because believe it or not, so you're late to an appointment. You walk into the door and the person is not happy with you because you're late to the appointment. Have you ever turned that around and you guys walked out laughing?
Yes.
That's flipping the script. You guys flip the script all the time, but it takes intentional practice to be able to think of it that way. So today we're going to work a little bit on changing our perception. Is that okay? And I'm going to teach you 3 techniques, body techniques, that you can take out of here that you can use wherever you go. Okay, I want to talk about your reticular activating system. How many people have heard of your reticular activating system? Yes. Okay, so your reticular activating system, boy, that is really hard for me to say, especially since I used to have apraxia and aphasia. is your brain's filter. So, especially today, we have thousands of things. Some people say it's 60,000 pieces of information inputted into our brain per second. Different scientists say it's different numbers. But can you imagine? You cannot possibly think about all those things at once. So your brain filters everything out. This affects, so we have 5 senses, right? This affects 4 of your senses except for smell. Did you guys know that your smell is actually in the emotional center of your brain? And that is why that sometimes you'll walk into a place and it smells like something that you had a negative reaction to, and you'll be like, oh, I reacted to that and it's negative, and where did this come from? Sometimes it's a sense of smell because that's tied to our emotional sense, the emotional part of our brain. But your other 4 senses are governed by your reticular activating system. So how many of you guys have had the experience that you have thought, oh, I need to buy a new car. I think I'm going to buy I just bought a cute little used silver RDX. And before, I used to drive an MDX, so I was constantly aware of MDXs, and I really hadn't even noticed RDXs, and then I bought one, and then I started looking for one, and they were everywhere. You guys had that experience? There's also an experience that has been, there's a lot of studies written about it. On Death Valley Highway, there are telephone poles about every 500 yards. It's a lot of ways in between, right? 500 yards. And yet, most of the people who go off the road in Death Valley hit a telephone pole. The percentage is something like 85%. Why? Because that's what their focus is on. Our brains are intelligent, they are programmable, and we can change what we program. So, you have a choice. What do you want to focus on? What do you want to do? So we're going to go to this in just a second, but I want to talk first about yes and yes but. So, do I have anybody who's ever done any theater, been in improv, is a brave soul, has never complained? Thank you. So, have you ever played yes and?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. She is the perfect candidate. Okay, so I'm going to, just so that we can show them, let's play yes but first. Did you ever play that?
No, I don't think I
Okay. Yes but means the opposite of yes and. So yes but, if I say but after something, what am I doing? I'm disagreeing, right? Okay, so we're going to play. It is a beautiful day outside.
Yes, but it's rainy.
Well, at least the weather is somewhat warm.
No, it's cold, a little for me.
Well, at least I'm dressed appropriately.
The shoes, though, I don't think that really works for this kind of weather.
Okay, so thank you. You were perfect. So I picked it. Okay, so what happens when? Don't leave yet. Come back. Come closer. Come closer. So what happens when that happens?
Shuts down the conversation.
It shuts down the conversation. What else? Yeah, it's negative. What else?
Negative attitude toward the person who said it.
Ooh, it makes the person who's saying it feel negative. Okay, what else?
It makes the person who's initiating the conversation feel bad about themselves.
Okay. But how many times do we do that? Somebody says, oh, I hear you're on a job search. Yeah, but it's not going so well. Right? We're going to talk about how to change that. Okay, so now we're going to flip it. We're going to play yes and. Why are we demonstrating? Because I really want you guys to remember this. Yes, but. You saw what we just did. We would play it longer, but we don't have time. Now we're going to play yes and. Okay? I'm assuming you know how. You just did such a wonderful job with yes, but. And you started this time.
Isn't it gorgeous outside today?
Yes, and I hear it's going to be even better tomorrow.
The horizon this week is beautiful. Sunny every single day.
Did you see that sunset last night?
Beautiful.
It was incredible.
Oh my goodness, one of the most gorgeous sunsets I've ever seen.
Doesn't Oklahoma have nice sunsets?
Oh my, that's why I live here. I love them.
Oh, and the sunrise yesterday
Oh,
too.
yes. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. God just keeps showing up and showing off.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was perfect. Yes, give her a hand. She did a fantastic job. Thank you very much. So what's the difference between yes but and yes and?
It was much more enjoyable.
It was much more enjoyable. Okay, what else?
What are the energies that you get?
Oh, it created energy. It created a positive energy versus a negative energy, right?
It encourages someone to speak some more.
Oh, it encouraged, the other person to continue the conversation. So what if we went into situations, no matter whether it's a job interview, no matter if it's talking to our kids, no matter if it's a fight with our spouse, instead of saying, yes, but, if we switched the script, flipped the script, and said, yes, and, how would that change? The person says, I don't have a job for you. Yes, and I so appreciate that. But if you have any other friends that you might refer me to, please keep me in mind. Thank you for having me today. You see how that becomes a yes and? You know, I don't think your skills fit here. Well, I appreciate that input. Instead of letting them carry the conversation in a negative way, you become the yes and person. You can take any conversation and do that. So somebody said it changed the energy, right? If we consciously plan to do yes and, no matter if somebody's being negative or not, you will change how they're reacting to you. Do you think if I continue to say, oh, and it's beautiful, and things are awesome, do you think that other person's going to continue to be negative? No, people want to mirror and mimic you, right? It's a natural thing our brain does. It's not a conscious thing. That's another workshop that I teach is about mimicking, mirroring, or body language copies somebody we're in tune with. So those things are the tricks that will help us to move forward. So yes and. Okay, so let's talk about your body language. And I love this photo because what do you think let's talk about these women. All the same woman, of course, but what's she feeling?
Bored.
Okay.
Ready to go. Are you on the way to the end?
And ready, no, you were right, ready to go. And then, at the end, she's enthusiastic. But how many times do we practice sitting in a chair, not because we intend to send that message, but because when you sit in a chair and you don't intentionally think about how you're sitting, we often wind up sitting more like one of these two than like this, right? What happens if that recruiter comes out and sees this person versus that recruiter comes out and sees this person? So now, everybody stand up and I'm gonna teach you a trick. If you've seen some of my workshops before, you probably know this one. Besides, you guys needed the stretch. So, Amy Cuddy did some phenomenal work. I really appreciate her work. A lot of people gave her grief about it when she did her TED Talk, and then there's all sorts of other research now that has proven all of her theories, and hers were scientific studies as well. That study says that whatever position that you stand in, whether open or closed, for 90 seconds to 120 seconds will change your brain chemistry. So, if you sit in a closed negative position for 120 seconds, 2 minutes, it brings up your cortisol level. What's your cortisol level? Stress hormone. You got it. So if I sit there in a closed position for 2 minutes, I will start feeling more stressed because our brain automatically reads what our body is doing. And my brain says, oh, she's stressed. I should feel more stressed. And it starts escalating it. But we have the choice. We can control our brains. We do not have to allow our brains to control us. Believe it or not, God gave us a gift to be able to make choices. So we can choose to flip it. And we can choose to bring up our power hormone. That's actually testosterone. A lot of people used to think women didn't have that, but it's present in both male and female. And how do you do that? You stand in an open position. So everybody, Wonder Woman or Superman or whatever your favorite hero is, everybody stand with your feet shoulder width apart and your arms on your hips. Okay, so if you stand like this for 2 minutes, you will increase your feeling of confidence and your feeling of self-accomplishment and your feeling of being positive about the way the world goes. You only have to do that for every 120 seconds. So think of your favorite superhero. Okay, so that's who you are. Whoever your favorite superhero is. So now, every time you see that superhero, whether on television, whether in social media, whether wherever, you're going to think, oh, I can power pose. Okay, thank you. Everybody can. Okay, so why do I want to teach you that? Because we can change the way we're feeling. We don't have to feel like we're stressed all the time. We can do that. Can you always stand like this in a job interview? No, but here's what you can do. There are ways to sit and do the very same thing. So I suggest that before you go to the job interview, you go into the restroom, into a stall, lock the door, and power pose for at least 2 minutes. That will start you out in the right position. Then, when you're in the interview, make sure that you're sitting feet apart and read something if possible. Why do you want to read something? Well, it does. It can help you look intellectual, and it also brings your body into a position of power, and it will increase the hormones you want to increase. Does that make sense? Why am I demonstrating all these? Because I don't want you to say, I went to this workshop and she taught us some good stuff and I really can't remember what it was. I want you guys to remember these things. So we've learned yes and instead of yes but, and open instead of closed, right? Okay. I want to talk for a minute about the pit. Everybody gets pulled into the pit, right? If you have not read Crushing by T.D. Jakes, I said I was only going to recommend one book today, and I'm sorry I can't do that. If you have not read Crushing by T.D. Jakes, I highly recommend it. It is a phenomenal book. If you don't want to buy the book, it's available at the library, but there is also on Stephen Furtick's Elevation podcast, there is a podcast between Stephen Furtick and between T.D. Jakes, and that is phenomenal. It'll give you the flavor of the book without having to read the book.
You said
Crushing. Like crushed grapes. So sometimes we all go through things. We have too many things that weigh heavy on us, and it can just feel like we're sinking at times. Sometimes it's a chemical imbalance in our bodies. Sometimes it's a layer of too many things happening. From December 5th to about December the 20th, I had about 14 people I knew pass away. And my dad went into the hospital. And my son was diagnosed with something. And so I sort of fell in the pit. It's gonna happen. I'm not saying, I don't want you to misunderstand me and think I'm gonna tell you you're never gonna fall in that pit. But what I am saying is you can make the choice to flip your script. You can make your choice to do one baby step at a time to get you to the next higher thing. Go have coffee with a friend. Listen to something positive. Listen to a podcast. Watch a funny movie. There are multiple things that you can do to start bringing yourself back up. And you'll find that the higher you climb, the easier it is to get to the next step up. You have to intentionally work on it. If you haven't figured out, my word for the day is intentional. So you have to climb your way out. You have to be willing to say, okay, I am here. Oh my goodness, I am depressed. I am struggling, or whatever your emotion is that day, and say, what is one thing I can do to change it? Can I make a phone call to a friend? Can I go to coffee with somebody? Can I pick up the phone and ask somebody to coffee? Can I go to church? Can I read a book? Hope Rising. Can I do something that's going to help me step forward? Do something different. You need to get out of your routine. I highly recommend walks. That is one of the best things to do. I have been through so many challenging things in my life that I thought I was not going to survive. At times, I'm like, oh my goodness, where am I going to go now? So what do you do in that situation? My lifesaver, especially in February, I had a really interesting situation, was walks. I got my shoes on and I went outside and I just walked. And that walking will also increase those feel-good hormones and will help you. Walk at least a mile if you can. I know that sounds like a long way, but once you get out there, listen to a good podcast while you're doing it. Do something different. If you want something in your life that you've never had, you have to do something you've never done. So think about, what can I change? What can I do different? In order to reach your goals, you have to first envision your goals. So this is the next step I'm going to tell you to do. I said I was going to tell you 3, but I'm going to teach you one more body language thing before we go. And I know I'm getting close on time here, but I just have several things that are really on my heart. And if you say I want to go to Paradise, Florida, but I've never been to Paradise, Florida. And yes, there is a city called Paradise. And I've never been to Paradise, Florida. If I don't look at a map, create a plan, is it likely I'm going to make it to Paradise, Florida?
No, that's like.
Better than Paradise, California.
Oh. Yes, exactly. I'm going to wind up somewhere else besides where I wanted to go, right? So this is a new year. Great time to sit down and take your skills, those 3 things I had you write down a while ago, and say, ooh, what could I do with this? What could I do with these skills? What could I use? What job could I do if I just focused on these things that I know I'm really good at? And instead of always looking for that job that's going to pay the bills, how about if you look for your skills and then find the job? What if you reverse engineer it? And then look at companies that actually hire for those kinds of things, who might have that kind of job, and start asking people to coffee. Do you know that the best thing that's ever happened to me were connections? People tell me I'm a really good connector. That's because I love people. I really do. And so everything good that's happened in my life has not begun because I found something on the internet, although sometimes I find people on the internet. It's come because I connected with somebody. So I really want to encourage you to create your vision and then start connecting with people who maybe are in that field or who work at the company who might have a connection with your vision. Whatever you believe your circumstances to be, you're right. If I look at this and I say, well, this is a really bad time, and I recently went through some job transition. I was doing more ghostwriting, long story, don't need to go there, but it was not pretty, okay, I need to go back to speaking and coaching. But my dad was in the hospital. Several friends passed away. My son had health issues. So I could have gone, this really sucks, God. How come I am in this situation? Or I can go, oh, thank you, Lord, for the flexibility to be in this situation. Show me where I need to go next. My choice, right? It is your choice. Whatever you believe, you create. That's that reticular activating system again, correct? When you think about something you want, you begin to find it. It's because our brain looks for patterns. Our brain looks for focus. If you decide, oh, I might like to be a circus clown, you're going to, and you think, I have the skills to be a great circus clown, those things are going to start showing up. Oh, I see a circus clown. Oh, that person is a circus clown on the side. Yes, that's being silly, but it's the point that if you're looking for it, your brain is going to find it. Because those things are already in your world. You just aren't aware of them until you tell your brain you want to be aware of them. So what we believe occurs. We can choose. We can always choose. That's the one thing that nobody can take away from you. Nelson Mandela was in prison for a long, long time. The one thing he could choose was not his circumstances, not what he ate every day, not who he hung out with. He got to choose his attitude. And when people wrote him off and said, that's the end of Nelson Mandela, he went back and became the leader of the country, right? Because he chose his attitude. He chose what he wanted to do. You can plan where you're going. So you have to plan, what do I want to do? This is a perfect time. Instead of seeing this period of time of your life of, I'm just looking for a job, take a minute of that day to think about, where do I want to go from here? What can I do? How can I find someone and make that connection with that person? You have the choice to choose joy. I'm going to teach you one last technique today because I want you to remember how you can change your body language, your brain chemistry, all of these things, and these will help you if you choose to use them. So everybody stand up one more time. And so I'm going to teach you about breathing. Something we take for granted. We all have to do it to still be on the planet, right? Except we forget to do it. We breathe really shallowly. Sometimes you'll be really stressed and you'll realize, oh, I'm really shallow breathing if you become aware of it. So I want to teach you a breathing technique that's going to help you, again, flip that script. That's what today is about. Your choice, making that choice to flip the script. So there's a million breathing techniques, and you can actually Google them and find some really good ones depending on what you're dealing with. This one will help you deal with anxiety and help you take your brain back from the amygdala, which is the part of your brain who said that's the flight or fight syndrome, to I'm in control. So I call it the 4-4-4 just because it's an easy way to remember it. So we're going to breathe in for 4. We're going to hold for 4. And we're going to let out for 4. One more time, please. Breathe in for 4. Hold for 4. Let out for 4. And do that at least 4 times. So if you will do that, you have the choice of being back in control of your brain and choosing what you want to do with your life, because it really is a choice. You can get to the end and you can go, I wish I could have, I should have. Or you can say, my life was well lived. Did I do what I wanted? So I hope that was beneficial today. Yes, and power pose, breathe, and choose your joy. Thank you.
I think that was your best one yet. But everyone